Good afternoon, 4th grade. Today we're going to continue reading in our novel, James and the Giant Peach. Before we get started, we have a quick write. It says, have you ever seen a rainbow? What have you heard about how rainbows were created? Press pause, write down your answer, and play when you're ready for the focus question. Our focus question for today is, how does the author reveal the theme of the poem? Our vocabulary words are pinnacle, and that's the most successful point or culmination. The top of this mountain is the pinnacle of the mountain. The next word is entrancing. That's when you look as if you've cast a spell, someone has cast a spell on you. You are mesmerized, you're not paying attention to anything else. This is an example of this of the snake putting a spell on the girl. The girl is entranced. And last is publicity. That's when you get attention from the media. So all of these reporters are giving the person publicity. Turn the page, and we're on page 113, chapter 37, and we're going to use our CSPS strategy. Let's begin reading on page 113. And so at this point, the peach fell from the sky and it landed on top of the Empire State Building on the spike. And that's where we are on page 113. It was a really amazing sight, and in 2 or 3 minutes, as soon as the people below realized that this now couldn't possibly be a bomb, they came pouring out of the shelters and the subways to gape at the marvel. The streets for half a mile around the building were jammed with men and women, and when the word spread that they were actually living things moving about on the top of the great round ball, then everyone went wild with excitement. "It's a flying saucer," they shouted. "They are from outer space. They are men from Mars. Or maybe they came from the moon." And a man who had a pair of binoculars in his eyes said, "They look pretty particular to me, I'll tell you that." Police cars and fire engines came screaming in from all over the city and pulled up outside the Empire State Building. 200 firemen and 600 policemen swarmed into the building and went up in the elevators as high as they could go. And then they poured out onto the observation roof, which is the place where tourists stand just at the bottom of the big spike. We'll stop right there because we have information about the characters and the setting. In box 1A, you would write, "The people in the street of New York City were excited when they realized that there were things moving on top of the peach." Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, we would write down this sentence on page 113. "And when the word spread that there were actually living things moving about on the top of the great round ball, then everyone went wild with excitement." Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the setting. And for the setting on box 2A, we would write, "The peach landed on the needle at the top of the Empire State Building." Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, we would write down this quote at the top of page 113. "And suddenly there was the giant peach, caught and spiked upon the very pinnacle of the Empire State Building." Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're at the bottom of page 113. All the policemen were holding their guns at the ready, with their fingers on the triggers, and the firemen were clutching their hatchets. But from where they stood, almost directly underneath the peach, they couldn't actually see the travelers on top. "Ahoy there!" shouted the police chief. "Come out and show yourselves!" Suddenly the great brown head of the centipede appeared over the side of the Peach. His black eyes, as large and round as two marbles, glared down at the policemen and the firemen below. Then his monstrous, ugly face broke into a wild grin. The policemen and firemen all started shouting at once. "Look out!" they cried. "It's a dragon!" "It's not a dragon, it's a wampus. It's a gorgon. It's a sea serpent. It's a prop. It's a manticore." 3 firemen and 5 policemen fainted and had to be carried away. "It's a schnozzwanger," cried the chief of police. "It's a whangdoodle," yelled the head of the fire department. The centipede kept on grinning. He seemed to be enjoying enormously the commotion he was causing. "Now see here," shouted the chief of police, cupping his hands to his mouth. "You listen to me. I want you to tell me exactly where you've come from." "We've come from thousands of miles away," the centipede shouted back, grinning more broadly than ever and showing his brown teeth. "There you are!" cried the chief of police. "I told you they have come from Mars." We'll stop right there because we have information about the problem. In box 3A, you would write, "The police and insects are scared of how large the police and firemen are scared of how large the insects are." Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. And for the quote, you would write down this quote on page 114. The policemen and firemen all started shouting at once. "Look out!" they cried. "It's a dragon." Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready to keep reading. We're at the top of page 115. "I guess you're right," said the head of the fire department. At this point, the old green grasshopper poked his huge green head over the side of the Peach, alongside the centipedes. 6 more big, strong men fainted when they saw him. "That one's an oink," said the head fire department. "I just know it's an oink." "It's a cockatrice," yelled the chief of police. "Stand back, men. It may jump down on us any moment." "What on earth are you talking about?" the old green grasshopper said to the centipede. "Search me," the centipede answered. But they seemed to be in an awful stew about something. Then Miss Spider's large, black, murderous-looking head, which to a stranger was probably the most terrifying of all, appeared next to the grasshopper. "Snakes and ladders!" yelled the head of the fire department. "We're finished now. It's a giant scorpula." "It's worse than that," cried the chief of police. "It's a ferocious nid. Oh, just look at that verminous, gruesome face." Gruesome face. "Is that the kind that eats whole-grown men for breakfast?" the head of the fire department asked, going white as a sheet. "I'm afraid it is," the chief of police answered. "Oh, please, why doesn't someone help us get down from here?" Miss Spider called out. "It's making me giddy." "This could be a trick," said the head of the fire department. "Does anyone make a move? Don't anyone make a move until I say." "They've probably got space guns," muttered the chief of police. "But we've got to do something," the head of the fire department announced grimly. "About 5 million people are standing down there on the streets watching us." "Then why don't you put up a ladder?" the chief of police asked him. "I'll stand at the bottom and hold it steady for you while you go up and see what's happening." "Thanks very much," snapped the head of the fire department. Soon there were no less than 7 large, fantastic faces peering down over the side of the Peach. The centipedes, the old green grasshoppers, Miss Spiders, the earthworms, the ladybugs, the silkworms, and the glowworms. And a sort of panic was beginning to break out among the firemen and the policemen on the roof. Then, all at once, the panic stopped, and a great gasp of astonishment went up all around. For now a small boy seemed to be standing up there beside the other creatures. His hair was blowing in the wind, and he was laughing and waving and calling out, "Hello, everybody, hello!" For a few moments the men below just stood and stared and gaped. They simply couldn't believe their eyes. "Bless my soul!" cried the head of the fire department, going red in the face. "It really is a boy, isn't it?" "Don't be frightened of us, please," James called out. "We are so glad to be here." "What about those others behind you?" shouted the chief of police. "Are any of them dangerous?" "Of course they're not dangerous," James answered. "They're the nicest creatures in the world. Allow me to introduce them to you one by one, and then I'm sure you will believe me." We'll stop right there because we have information about the solution. In box 4A, you would write, James tells everyone not to be frightened by the insects. And James tells the policemen and firemen that he will introduce the insects to them so that they won't be afraid. Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the quote. We'll write down this quote at the bottom of page 116. "Of course they're not dangerous," James answered. "They're the nicest creatures in the world. Allow me to introduce them to you one by one." Press pause to write down your answer and play when you're ready for the paragraph. Paragraph says, "What lesson has James learned through his journey with the insects? How do you know?" And so if we're thinking about how James responds to the policemen and the firemen being scared, we know that James has learned not to be afraid of the insects, and he is helping other people overcome their fear.